All right, today we're going to talk about some basics that you need to know for debate, as well as how to use the terms. So we have some basics, and these all started formally in policy debate, but they are used in every other type of debate as well. While judging nationals this past year, I noticed how much these terms are used, whether it's through their formal name or informally. So it's important to know for every type of debate. And the first one you want to know are harms. So harms are bad things that are happening right now in the world. So right now there are people dying, or a lot of people are going hungry because of the coronavirus, or X amount of people were without food because schools were closed in the spring. Those are all harms. Again, they can be stated formally. You could say the harm to this, or harms that exist are, or you can just discuss them. The next thing you want to know is called inherency. So inherency, when used formally, is talking about why your plan or something isn't being done. So if a lot of people are going hungry, why isn't something being done to stop it? Well, there's not enough funding in the budget. That is an inherent barrier. You might also hear that term. So the inherent barrier, literally think of it like as a physical barrier to help that we have to get through, get around, or get through to solve the problem or the harms. Another inherency could be that our governor wants to get reelected, and he knows that by helping hunger, that might not get him elected. Or there's not enough support to get this plan passed. All of those different things could be inherency. So a plan is not always used in every type of debate. So example, it's used in policy. It can be used in LD. Usually you have a plan in Congress, but you are not allowed to have a plan in PF. Sometimes people get around that by calling it a generalized alternative, which is technically allowed, but you have to be careful with that, because if you're trying to skirt around this plan issue by doing a generalized alternative, you can get into some big trouble. So a plan essentially is what you're going to do to fix the problem or the harms. So let's say people are going hungry. That's our harms. Our inherency is that there's not enough money in the budget to fix the problem. Our plan is that we are going to have lunch in the park for anyone. Every person, every citizen will be able to go and get lunch in the park every single day for the next 6 months. So that's a plan. It's very specific, and it says exactly what we will do to try to fix the problem. If you are doing policy debate, your plan may need to be a little bit more specific than if you're doing like LD debate. Oftentimes your plan is just written out, like, in order to fix the harms, we are going to provide lunch in the park for any citizen from 0 to 120 for the next 6 months, beginning August 1st. Somebody might ask you where you're going to get the money for that. That can also be included in your plan. Say money for this is going to come from a reallocation of funds that were going to some other unimportant thing. They may ask you who is going to enforce this. You could say that the government's going to enforce this through local schools. You could say that the Department of Health and Human Services is going to enforce this. These don't specifically need to be stated in your plan, but you need to be ready to answer them in case somebody questions you. The next thing that they may ask you about is, or that you need to know, is called solvency. So being able to solve. You may be asked, how can you solve that? How can you solve your harms? How can you solve this other problem? And you can solve it and you give specific reasons. So by providing lunch in the park, that gives people at least one free meal. And by having one free meal, you're getting enough food to survive for 24 hours. You can talk about how when you have at least one meal a day, then it not only helps those that are hungry, but it also helps them to learn better. One of your harms could have been that people can't learn or focus on school because they're hungry. So you would be solving that by giving them food in the park. If we're going less formal, saying like if you present a plan in LD, you can say your plan solves all of these problems that are talked about in the round because it does blah, blah, blah. If you are presenting some sort of change or plan, you need to be ready to answer how you're going to solve. The next thing you want to learn or know is advantages and disadvantages. So advantages, they're like added benefits or positives. And disadvantages are the negative things that happen. In formalized debate, usually these things are in addition to the stuff you presented in your plan and your solvency. Sometimes you may present your advantages, and within those, that's where you might have your harms and your solvency, all within your advantages. So I might say one of my advantages is focusing in schools. Let's say I haven't talked about that in my case. I say when people don't have food, they can't focus in schools. And by giving them at least one meal a day, we're doing blah, blah, blah. We're helping them focus in schools. That would be an advantage. Disadvantages and advantages can, again, be used both formally and informally. You could have separate cards and a shelled out advantage that you can use, or you could say this leads to these great benefits or these disadvantages really informally. And those are some things that you may need. So those are the basics of terms that you want to use. Some other terms that you might need is a counter plan. Again, this will not be used in public forum, but will be used in LD and policy. But a counter plan is when the affirmative gives a plan, says we should give lunches to everyone every day in the park. The negative would say either they're going to say this other plan is better, and they're going to tell you what the other plan is better. To come back at that, the affirmative then has two options, well, two basic options. They're going to say, no, my plan is better. Or they're going to say, we can do both. And if you're doing both, that means you're going to do this plan, which means you are affirming the resolution, so you win. When you say we can do both, that's called a perm or permutation. So if I say perm, do both, And I'm going to affirm the resolution because I'm going to affirm by doing this plan, but I'm also going to just do this other added thing. One of the last key terms based off of policy terms that are used in other types of debates is called a critique, or a K. So you see critique is not spelled like this. We're using a German form of the word critique, where we're being critical of an argument. So we're taking a different approach. So if we were debating this hunger school lunch issue, somebody could run a critique and say, we should be looking at not all people, but people that are maybe disadvantaged, which are maybe people of color. So we should only be focusing on them. Or they can say that nothing is important until we fix the environment. So you might say, like, how does that have anything to do with our topic or what we're debating? And sometimes it doesn't, but critiques are ran as a way of critiquing what you're doing in a debate round. They're saying it doesn't really matter what our topic is, because no matter what, every day, every round, we should be talking about the environment. They might say that debate leads to conversations, and we should not care about who wins or who loses. We should just care about a conversation. I'm not saying these critiques are going to be for everyone, or even that they're good or bad, but these types of things exist. So we'll talk about later how to answer these, but these are mostly going to be brought up in policy and LD, and not even all LD, just very progressive LD. And pretty progressive policy, but they're, depending on the topic, can be more common. This year's policy topic is about criminal justice reform. So policing and fingerprinting and those types of things. This topic is going to be very critique heavy, because they're going to be like, why does it matter who wins or who loses? We really need to be making real change. How can we be making real change instead of this fake change that exists in a debate round? So those are some basic terms to know for all types of debate.